Hello, this is Yvonne Menier, and this is lesson number 8 in the EQStitch lessons. We're going to start by double-clicking on the icon on our desktop to launch our EQStitch program. The first thing that will come up by default is the tip of the day. We're just going to close that for now. And we're going to create a new project, and we're going to call this video lesson 8. And this is on blocks and embroidery. And then we're going to say OK. And I know that my project has now been named called Video Lesson 8. It shows in the upper left corner of the screen. Now the default for the program is to open up on the quilt layout work table. We're going to make a couple changes to this work table now that we'll be able to work with a little bit later on, but I want to make the changes now at the beginning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my layout. And I want my layout just to be one block. And I'm going to say keep it the same height and width. And I'm going to have it be a 6-inch block. Now it's automatically added a border around it. That is the default for the program. So when you click on the Borders tab, you can see that border is there. You can add or delete your borders. I'm just going to leave that for now. I'm going to click on layer 1, and there is my setup now in which I can add a block that I draw to the center, and it'll have a border around the edges. I'm just going to save this to my sketchbook, so I'm going to click on the Add to Sketchbook icon, and that places it in my sketchbook. That way if I change and do something different, I can always go back to this because it's already in my sketchbook. Now when we look at this screen here, it tells us a few things. Even though I told this to make a 6-inch block, it tells me the overall size is 8 inches, and that's because it's added a 1-inch strip on each side of the block as a frame. You can see that size up here at the top, or you can see it down here at the bottom. It lists it in 2 different places. I'm going to change something on the screen here, and this is a seldom used tool. I like to use it all the time, but I'll just show you how to change it. Right now we have layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. Layer 1 is where you lay your blocks. Layer 2 is where you traditionally would put your motifs or your applique patches. And layer 3 is where you would put your embroidery or your quilting stencil lines. Each layer is separate at this stage. I want to be able to, when I go to layer 3, to turn off some of my other layers so that I can look just at layer 3, or I can turn them on so I can see all layers at once. The way I do this is I go up to the drawing board setup, and in here they're under View Settings, under Tool Options, View Settings. There's layer icons, and it says Provide Icons to Show and Hide Quilt Layers. I'm going to click that on and say OK. And now when we look at our tabs at the bottom of the screen, we can see that we have little light bulbs next to each one of these layers. When those are showing, that means we can turn the layers on and off as we want. So I've got that set up. I'm just going to leave that for now. Now I want to create a block. So now I'm going to go on my Work on Block icon up here, and that's going to change me to the block work table. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to be able to see these little dots on my screen. The 6-inch block is the default for the program, and I'm just going to leave that at 6 inches. I'm going to click on the drawing board options box. Again, it shows me 6 inches is the block that I have. I'm going to change my snap grid to display large dots. And the graph paper, I'm going to change the number of cells to 3. So 3 by 3. What this will do is on a 6-inch block, if I create a 3-inch grid across it, it will give me a 9 patch, 3 across, 3 down, and each one of those patches will be 2 inches because 3 times 2 is 6. So I'll just say OK. Now that I have that all set, I can go over here to my graph grid and click on it to activate it. and move my cursor to the upper left hand corner of the block, and I'm going to click, hold, and drag to the lower right hand and let go. And this will now create my 9 patch. I'm going to click on Add to Sketchbook, and that saves it in the sketchbook for me. I'm also going to click on the refresh icon at the top because I want to see where all my intersecting nodes are. So now I can see that quite clearly. Now I want to quickly draw more options on this block, so I'm going to take my straight line tool and I'm going to click from node to node in some of the corners. And I'm just making half square triangles. And then using the rulers along the top and along the side, I'm visually going to place a line in the center of each one of the blocks. And I'm just going to refresh that again just so I can see my nodes clearly. And then I'm going to add this to the sketchbook also. Now I can go to the Color tab and I can color my block however I want. I'm just going to quickly place some colors in here. I don't really have a pattern in mind. I'm just coloring it so you can see how it can show the segments a little bit easier. Quite a colorful block. Okay, now I have it all colored and I'm going to add that to my sketchbook. So now I have a block that's colored, that's drawn, that is 6 inches square, and I had my quilt layout also to make a 6-inch block with a frame around it. So those two will match perfectly when I go to lay it into the quilt. Now what I want to do is I want to create an image of this. And the reason I want an image of this is because I want to create machine embroidery to go over the top of it. And I want to be able to see my quilt block in the background. But I can't just save this and bring this onto the stitching tab because you can't bring a patch draw block onto the stitching tab. You can only bring an image to work with, or you can bring a motif to work with. So what I need to do is I need to take this and I'm going to say File and Export Image. So what it's doing is it's taking a look at this image of this block and it's going to save it for me as an image rather than a block. So what I need to do is I'm going to save this on my hard drive, and I'm going to go into my documents for my program, and that is in my documents, and it's in my EQ7. And in my EQ7 there's a few different folders that are in there, and I'm going to click on the user folder and I'm going to just name this my colored block. And I have the option of saving this in different formats of images. I can do JPEGs, bitmaps, GIF, TIFF, or PNG. I'll just leave it as the default Windows bitmap for now, and I'm going to say Save. Now it's telling me that I'm saving it as a 6 by 6 inch block, and it's outlined my patches and the whole block. And I'm just going to leave that and say OK. Now I'm also going to save this colored image in the sketchbook. I already did that, and I can double check that by looking at View Sketchbook, and when I go to the blocks, there's my colored image. So this block is saved in the sketchbook that is a part of my Video Lesson 8 project file. But because I also saved it as an image in the Users folder under Documents, I can take that image and bring that into any other project that I work with without having to reopen this project, saving it, and then go back to the new project. I can just simply grab that image out of my Users folder. So I like to either save it there if I know I'm going to use it again. If I'm not going to use it again, sometimes I just save it to my desktop. The choice is up to you. Now let's take a look at creating some embroidery, a quilt stencil that can go over the top of this. So we're going to click on the Work on Stitching icon. That puts us on our stitching work table. This is our embroidery work table, and that's what I want. I'm not creating an applique. But I need to see my image of my block in order to figure out what's going to be the best design to enhance that block. So I need to click on the Tracing Image tab, and then I'm going to tell the program to import that image. And it's going to ask me, where is it coming from? Well, again, I have to go and I have to find it on my computer. And it depends on how you've set your program up, if you've used the defaults or not. I'm just using the defaults that are in the program as I loaded the EQ program on. And I am going to my documents, and then my EQ7. And I need to find the users folder. And it did not go in there. I didn't put it in properly. I just put it in my EQ7, but it's here. I'm going to say open, and there it is. Now this is telling me in pixels that it's 900 by 900. I want to see it as inches for the moment, because I remember, yes, it was 6 by 6 inches. So when I click on inches, I can see it, and I'm going to say OK. And then I'm just going to click over here in the corner, and there's my block. Now it's asking me if I'm going to trace the image, and do I want to turn the autofill off, and I'm just going to say yes, I'll turn that off for now. Now what we need to look at here is our drawing table for our embroidery. This is a 4-inch drawing table, although we had a 6-inch block. So on the Artwork tab, I need to make sure that my drawing table for my embroidery matches the drawing table for the block. So I'm going up to the drawing board, and the hoop size, or the drawing board size for embroidery for a 6-inch block would be 150 by 150. You may want to use a conversion chart to convert between inches and millimeters. I quite often have to refer to that. Now I know that my hoop area and my block size are the same. On my Tracing Image tab, I can make this darker or lighter, whatever I want, in order to be able to see when I'm drawing my artwork for my embroidery. So you can play with that however you want. So on the Artwork tab, if I look at this, this is basically a 9-patch, and each one of the elements has different parts to it. These are strips in here. This is a square. These are half square triangles out here. It doesn't make any difference what your background block is, except for one thing. When I am thinking about drawing a design to use for quilting, if I have a design that falls exactly on this seam line here, or here, or even out here, when I am hooping my design, I need to make sure that it is dead center right on, so it aligns with those pieced elements. If it's off just the slightest bit when I'm hooping, if I'm not quite accurate, my eye will see that. Therefore, when I'm drawing, I prefer not to have elements in my quilting stencil that will line up exactly with these lines. I would prefer to have something more circular that's going to rotate around, that's not necessarily going to line up with any of these segments. That way, all I need to do is center it in the hoop and let it stitch. If I do decide to have an element that lines up exactly, I need to be much more careful with my hooping when I'm at my machine. So let's just quickly draw a stencil here that we can use for embroidery. Before we do that, let's set up our drawing board again. And we're going to go down to the embroidery edge settings, and I want to change this to a bean stitch. You may call this a triple stitch. And I want to take the embroidery fill settings and I want to turn them off. And I'm going to say OK. So the reason I've set my drawing board up first before I draw anything is because when it goes to the Stitch tab, it will automatically apply those settings. So I'm going to click on the oval tool. I'm going to pick my favorite, which is the heart. and I'm just going to click and drag a design in the center. Now you can see my heart has lined up with the center line here, and that's all right. I'm just placing it here for now. I can move it later. I'm going to click on the pick tool, and that selects my heart, and now my wreath maker is available to me. Now I know this is a 9 patch. I could easily say I want 9 segments going around. I could say I want 4 segments. It's totally up to me. I tend to work with odd numbers. That way you don't have to worry about it lining up. So I'm going to say 7, and I'm going to bring it in a bit in the center and tell it to go all the way out to the edge. And I'm going to say OK. And it pretty well fills the block. I'm going to center it, and now I'm going to go to the Stitch tab, and you can see the bean stitch is automatically applied because we set that up on our drawing board. I'm going to color it, and I'm going to pick a color that's quite different from something that I had in my actual block because I want it to stand out a little bit. I'm going to do this limey yellowy color. And I'm going to use the spray can tool, and I'm going to click once, and it fills everything there. And then I'm going to save that into the sketchbook. Now, I can't see my block anymore when I'm on the Stitch tab, so I can't tell if this is actually going to enhance it or not. If I go back to my Artwork tab, I see it as a line drawing, but that doesn't really tell me a lot at this point. It's just simply a line drawing, and stitches can look very different than the line drawing. But I'm going to save that, make sure that's in there, and it is. So now I have a block, and I've got my line drawing ready to go for my stitches. So I want to actually see the stitches, and we can only do that by placing it on the quilt work table. So let's just click on the work on quilt icon. There is our design layout that we had. I'm going to go over to the right hand side. I'm going to click on set block, and there is our block that we drew. And I'm going to move the cursor over and just click once, and it applies it to the center. I'm going to click on the paintbrush tool. I'm going to select a color for my border. I want my borders to be the same all the way around. So if I hold the control key and click, it fills them all at once. And then I'm going to say add it to the sketchbook. So now I've got my block. Now if I don't want to see that, I can turn that off, but I do want to see it right at the moment. So this is on layer 1. Layer 2, we did not make any applique, so I'm not going to use layer 2, but I am going to switch to layer 3, which is where we add our embroidery. I'm going to go over to the right hand side, and I'm going to click on the icon that says set embellishment. I'm going to click on that, and there is our outline that we drew for our block, for our quilting stencil. I'm going to come over here. Now on layer 3 and on layer 2, you have to hold the shift key and then click and drag from one corner to the other to get your quilting lines there. Now I didn't put it inside the block properly. You can see it's extending over here. So I'm going to click on the adjust tool, and then I'm going to click on my design, and there you can see it's highlighted it. Now I can go to my properties bar at the top, and I can see that my block is not the correct size. It's 6.25 by 6. I had a 6 by 6, so I'm going to change the top to 6, and it applies it, and now it's centered directly over my block. Now I can see how this is going to look. Now this is a little difficult to see because of the color, so I'm going to change the color of the thread here so I can see it. Now my tool for changing the color of the thread is not over here. It's not showing. It's hidden. So I'm going to click on the little black arrow at the bottom of the screen, and then I'm going to click on the word add and remove buttons, and I'm going to turn on my other features so that they're all available to me, and then I'm going to click in the blank space to close that. Now I have a tool down here that is a thread color, so I'm going to click on the set thread. I'm just going to move this over. And now I can change the color of my thread here that I have assigned. So I need to go with a darker color because this doesn't show up very well. And so I'm going to click on the dark navy blue. I'm going to tell it I want it to show as a solid line. So I'm going to click on the style and click on the solid line. I'm going to click on the weight and I'm going to make it thick. Now I'm only doing this as a visual so we can see it. So I've picked a darker blue, I've picked a straight line, and it's a thick line. And I'm going to click on the spray can and I'm going to come over and click on the line, and now I can see that a little bit better. And I'm going to add that to my sketchbook. So now you can see that you can visualize exactly how your stitching lines are going to look with your block in the background. If the block is taking away from the stitching line and you can't see it very well, you can go down to the layer 1, and because we have the little light bulb there, you can click on the light bulb and you can turn off the layer so you can see the stitches, or you can click on the light bulb again and it comes back. You can do the same on layer 3. You can click on the light bulb and it takes away the stitching. Click on the light bulb again and it brings your stitching line back. The other thing you can do when you're on the quilt work table, if you go to a blank space on the screen and you right click, you have the option of outlining the patches, outlining the blocks, outlining the border. Under embellishment, I like to set it to 3-dimensional. It just makes the stitches pop out a little bit more. And if you click again, you can see where it says show layer, and I've turned on layer 1, 2, and 3. You can also turn those layers off here rather than clicking on the little light bulb. It's totally up to you. But this is how you would create your block, you would create your quilting stencil lines, and then you bring it onto the quilt work table and you can see both of them together, because you cannot see your stitches when you go to the stitch tab when you're on the stitching work table. So I hope this helps you to visualize the work that you're doing, how you can save it, how you can bring your blocks in the background, and how you can visualize each and every step of the way. Enjoy the program.